Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive that we've curated just for you. We're going to be tackling disinformation today.
Yeah.
You sent us some great articles from the Union of Concerned Scientists.
Yeah, these articles are a fantastic foundation for understanding this.
For sure. So we're going to break it all down, figure out how disinformation works,
How it can be so tricky.
why it even matters, and, most importantly, arm you with the tools to spot it.
Exactly. So that you can be a more savvy information consumer.
Perfect. Let's jump right in. One thing that really stood out in these articles is this whole idea of disinformation versus misinformation.
Right.
I think a lot of people use them interchangeably,
They do.
but they actually have some pretty important differences.
Oh, they're very different. Misinformation is just wrong information.
Right.
Spread unintentionally. It's like, an honest mistake.
Yeah.
Like you share an article and later it turns out the data was wrong.
Right. We've all been there. But disinformation, that's a whole different beast.
It is. It is. Disinformation is intentional. It's a deliberate lie.
Okay.
Spread for a purpose. Like you can think of it as a weapon
A weapon.
that's carefully crafted to mislead people.
So it's like misinformation is an accidental fumble. Disinformation is like a calculated play to trick the opponent.
Ooh, I like that. That's a great analogy. And, one of the articles gave a classic example from history, the Dewey defeats Truman headline
Oh, yeah, that's a famous one.
back in the 1948 election.
Yeah,
I remember seeing that picture of Truman holding up the newspaper.
with the wrong headline.
Exactly. And, it was a huge error for the newspaper, but it was an honest mistake.
Right.
They went to print based on early predictions, not realizing that Truman was going to win.
Oh, wow.
So that's a prime example of misinformation, not disinformation.
Okay, that's a really helpful distinction. And, even though I know that difference, sometimes I still fall for things online.
Oh, absolutely.
And I feel like I should know better. But disinformation, it can be so sneaky.
It is, because it really preys on our psychology. Even the smartest people can be fooled.
Wow.
These articles really get into how that happens, even if we have good intentions,
Yeah.
One of the key concepts they highlight is this thing called the illusory truth effect.
Okay, the illusory truth effect. Tell me more about that.
Basically, it means that the more we see something, even if it's false, the more we tend to believe it. It's almost like our brains are tricked into thinking, well, if I've seen it so many times, it must be true.
So even if I initially have doubts, if I keep seeing it on social media,
Right.
or I keep hearing it from certain sources,
Yes.
I might start accepting it as fact,
Yeah.
like without even realizing it.
Exactly. It's like a shortcut that our minds take, especially when we're just bombarded with information all the time.
Yeah,
It's easier to just accept something than to constantly question it.
absolutely. Especially in today's world,
Mm.
where we're just overwhelmed with information all the time. So it's like our brains are trying to just make it simple
To avoid overload.
to avoid that overload.
Yeah.
Exactly. And, these disinformation folks, they know that, right?
They do.
They exploit that.
They do. They repeat those same lies over and over and over again.
It's like a drip, drip, drip.
Exactly. Across different platforms through all sorts of sources.
Wow. And so it eventually wears us down,
It does.
even if we were skeptical in the beginning.
Yes. And that's why it's so important to know about this little trap
Right.
and to develop ways to kind of resist it.
Okay. So we've got disinformation defined. We're starting to understand the psychology. But who are these people behind these campaigns? Like, what's motivating them to spread these lies?
Well, the articles point to a whole network of actors with different motives, really. Some spread disinformation for money. Others want to manipulate public opinion for political reasons.
So it's not just about spreading lies for the sake of it. There's often a bigger agenda.
Oh, there often is. Like, some groups use it to cause chaos, create division in society. Others want to erode trust in institutions or promote certain ideologies.
That's a little scary.
It is. It is. And what's even more worrying is that certain groups are targeted more than others.
Right. The articles mention communities of color are often the target of disinformation campaigns.
Yes, which is incredibly concerning.
It is. It is.
It's a tactic designed to exploit vulnerabilities and really amplify division.
So it's not just about spreading lies. It's about using those lies to harm certain communities.
Unfortunately, that's often the case. Now, to really get how these campaigns work, we have to look at the tactics they use. And the articles talk about this concept of a disinformation playbook.
A playbook. So like they have a set of go-to strategies for how they mislead the public.
Exactly.
Tell me about those strategies, those plays.
Well, one common one is to disguise a biased viewpoint as objective truth.
So like dressing up an opinion as a fact.
Exactly, making it sound more official.
Yeah.
They might cherry pick data, so they only present the stuff that supports what they're saying.
Wow.
And they'll often use vague language and appeals to emotion instead of citing sources, like experts.
It's tricky. It's like they create this hall of mirrors, so it's hard to know what's real.
That's a great way to put it. They want to create doubt and confusion so that people can't trust legitimate sources.
Okay, so we're starting to see how these campaigns operate. They exploit our psychology. They have
Yeah.
their playbook of tactics.
They do.
And they often have this hidden agenda.
Yes.
But what can we actually do about it? It feels kind of overwhelming, like fighting a hydra, cut off one head, two more growbacks.
That's a very valid feeling. But here's a crucial point. Countering disinformation isn't about winning arguments. It's not about trying to convince the people who are really dug in.
Okay.
It's about protecting ourselves and slowing down the spread of the harmful ideas.
So it's less about changing minds, more about like stopping the virus from spreading.
Yes, exactly. And one of the most effective things you can do is, well, nothing.
Wait, nothing. You're telling me to just ignore it.
Well, not exactly. Remember the illusory truth effect we talked about?
Mm.
Even sharing something to debunk it can actually backfire.
Because it spreads the lie further.
Yeah.
Even if I'm saying, hey, this is wrong.
You got it. Any engagement, even negative engagement, just gives it more attention.
Well, okay.
Which is what those spreading it want.
I never thought of it that way.
So yeah, no sharing, even to set the record straight.
So if no sharing, even to correct it, what else can we do?
Well, another really powerful technique is called inoculation.
Inoculation?
Yeah.
Like a vaccine for disinformation?
Exactly. The idea is if you warn people in advance about the types of disinformation out there on a certain topic, they become more discerning.
So you're giving them a heads up,
Yes.
saying, hey, watch out for this, without spreading the disinformation itself.
Exactly. Raising their awareness without amplifying the bad content.
That's pretty clever.
Yeah.
Are there any other ways to counter disinformation? So we talked about inoculation. That sounds like a great, preventative measure.
It is.
Are there other kind of proactive strategies we can use to counter disinformation?
Oh, absolutely. One of the most effective approaches is amplifying trusted sources.
Okay.
So think about flooding the information ecosystem with accurate, reliable content.
So it's like fighting fire with fire, but instead of flames, we're using facts.
Exactly. By sharing well-researched articles, reports from reputable organizations, insights from credible experts,
Okay.
we can counter all that noise and confusion created by disinformation.
That makes sense. And, the articles you sent, they mentioned a specific technique called the truth sandwich. What's that all about?
The truth sandwich. It's a really clever way to address a lie without giving it too much oxygen. You start and end with the truth.
Okay.
And you just briefly mention the lie in between to give it some context.
So instead of just repeating the lie, which could just reinforce it, you're bookending it with truth.
Exactly. It's like saying, here's the truth. Here's a lie that some people are spreading, and here's the truth again, just to reinforce it.
That's a great strategy. I like that a lot. It feels like a way to acknowledge the lie without letting it dominate the conversation.
You got it. And, the articles also emphasize the importance of relational organizing in countering disinformation.
Okay, relational organizing, we kind of touched on that earlier.
Yeah.
Can you break that down a little bit more? What does that actually look like?
It's all about having those one-on-one conversations with people you know and trust about these issues.
Okay.
It's based on the idea that we're much more likely to be influenced by people we have personal connections with.
So it's less about trying to win arguments on social media and more about having these conversations in our own circles.
Exactly. It's about building trust and sharing accurate information, in a personal setting.
Yeah.
And it can be incredibly effective, especially when you're dealing with sensitive topics.
So instead of getting into those heated online debates, I should be focusing on having calm, respectful conversations.
Yes.
With my friends and family and colleagues.
Precisely. And remember, it's not always about, changing someone's mind completely.
Right.
It's about planting those seeds of doubt, encouraging them to think critically, and helping them to be more discerning about the information they come across.
I like that approach.
Yeah.
It feels much more human and less confrontational.
It is. And, the articles also highlighted how disinformation campaigns often exploit existing divisions in society.
Right.
And they tend to target certain groups, especially communities of color.
That's such an important point. It's not just about spreading lies. It's about using those lies to divide us and to undermine trust in important institutions.
Exactly. And that's why it's so crucial to be aware of these tactics and to really approach information with a critical eye, especially when it comes to sensitive topics, like race, ethnicity, and social justice.
So let's say I see a post on social media and it seems like it's trying to stir up racial tension
Mm.
or it's spreading like fear and panic.
Yeah.
What steps can I take to evaluate it to make sure I'm not accidentally spreading disinformation?
First and foremost, remember the golden rule. Don't share it.
Okay.
Even if you're outraged and you want to call it out, sharing it could actually help it reach a wider audience.
Right, because any engagement, even negative, can amplify it.
Exactly. So instead of sharing, take a minute to look at the source.
Right.
Is it from a reputable news outlet, a respected organization, or is it from some random person who has a history of spreading, misinformation?
So it's like checking their credentials, like, are they trustworthy?
Exactly. It's so important to do your research before you hit that share button. And if it's an individual, look into their background. Have they spread hate speech before or promoted conspiracy theories?
Okay.
Those are red flags.
And I'm guessing it's also important to pay attention to the language that's being used and the overall tone of the post.
Oh, absolutely. Disinformation often relies on really emotionally charged language, inflammatory rhetoric,
Okay.
and generalizations about entire groups of people.
So if it's using dehumanizing language
Yeah.
or making sweeping statements about whole communities, or if it just feels designed to make people angry or afraid,
Yes.
those are all red flags.
Big red flags. Those are classic tactics to get around critical thinking
Gotcha.
and to make people more likely to just accept the false information.
Okay, so let's say I've looked at it and I've decided it's probably disinformation and I'm not going to share it. What else can I do?
Well, if it's on a social media platform, you can report it,
Okay.
for violating their terms of service.
So even if it doesn't get taken down right away, I'm at least flagging it?
Exactly. And the more people report it, the more pressure it puts on these platforms to do something.
That makes sense. It's like voting with your clicks.
Yes. Letting them know that content is harmful.
Okay.
You could also try to engage in a conversation with the person who shared it, if you're comfortable doing so.
That could be tricky though, right? Sometimes people get really defensive when you challenge their beliefs.
Oh, absolutely. And it's honestly not always worth the effort.
Yeah.
But if it's someone you care about and you think there's a chance of having a productive conversation,
Okay.
you could try to gently point out the flaws in their logic or share some credible information that counters their claims.
Oh, using that truth sandwich technique we talked about earlier.
Yes. Lead with the facts, briefly address the lie, and then reinforce the truth.
Gotcha.
And remember, it's not about winning.
Right.
It's about encouraging them to think critically. You might not change their mind immediately,
Right.
but you might spark a process of, reflection.
I like that. It's about empowering people to think for themselves, not just telling them what to believe.
Exactly. And going back to relational organizing, the articles really highlighted how powerful those conversations can be with people in our own networks.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit before. Could you remind me, how does that actually work in practice?
Relational organizing is all about using the trust and influence we have with people we know. It's recognizing that we're more likely to listen to and be persuaded by someone we know and respect,
Right.
rather than some random person online.
So instead of trying to convince, the entire internet, I should focus on those conversations with people in my life.
Exactly. Those are the people you have the most influence over and who are most likely to be open to what you have to say.
And it feels like a much more genuine way to fight disinformation. It's not shouting into the void. It's about those personal connections and fostering a culture of critical thinking in our own communities.
That's a great way to put it. It's about building a network of informed and engaged citizens who can help to counter those harmful narratives from the ground up.
That's inspiring. It reminds me that we're not alone in this and that even small actions can make a difference.
Absolutely. And one of the most empowering things from the articles is that we don't have to let disinformation win.
That's a really powerful statement.
Yeah.
How do we make sure that the truth prevails?
It all starts with awareness. By understanding how it works, the tactics, the motivations,
Okay.
we're better equipped to spot it and resist it.
So knowledge is our first line of defense.
Absolutely. And then it's about taking action.
Okay.
We can choose to amplify trusted sources, engage in those meaningful conversations, and support organizations that are fighting for truth and justice.
So it's like a multi-pronged approach.
Yeah.
We need to be vigilant. We need to be proactive about sharing good information.
Yes.
And supportive of the people and organizations that are holding those spreaders of disinformation accountable.
That's a great summary. And remember, one of the most effective ways to counter it is to focus on positive action, not just getting stuck in the negativity.
So instead of just dwelling on the problem, we should channel our efforts into creating solutions.
Precisely. By supporting organizations fighting for truth, getting involved in our communities, advocating for policies that promote transparency, and accountability,
Right.
we can help to build a more informed and resilient society.
I love that. It's a reminder that we have a choice. We're not powerless. We can choose to be part of the solution.
Exactly. We all have a role to play in building a more informed world.
This has been a really eye-opening conversation. I feel like I have a much better understanding of how complex this all is,
Good. I'm glad.
but also the power that we have
You do.
to push back.
You do.
Before we wrap up, is there anything else that we should mention? Any other insights or historical context that might be helpful?
As we've been talking about this, I've been thinking, and I kind of assumed disinformation was a new thing.
Yeah.
Something that came about with the internet and social media.
Yeah, a lot of people think that.
Yeah.
But while the internet has definitely made it spread faster and further,
Right.
disinformation is not a new invention.
Really?
It's been around for centuries as a way to manipulate and control.
Wow. So if we hopped in a time machine,
Yeah.
went back a few hundred years,
Right.
what kind of disinformation would we see?
Well, picture this. You're in the middle of a war.
Hmm.
Propaganda would be everywhere.
Oh, wow.
Each side spreading rumors,
Right.
fabricating stories to make their enemy look bad and to boost their own side.
So information warfare isn't a new thing either. It's always been part of how we fight.
It absolutely has. Throughout history, people in power have used disinformation to shape what people think.
To incite fear, keep control. Think about all the rumors and conspiracy theories that pop up when society is unstable.
Right.
Or using propaganda to justify what politicians are doing.
Wow. So it's not just a problem for the 21st century.
Nope. Oh, we've been dealing with this for a long time.
For a long time.
And, recognizing those patterns from the past can help us understand the tactics being used today.
Okay.
It's like they're using an updated playbook, but a lot of the core strategies are the same.
So the ways they spread it may have changed, but the basic ideas behind disinformation are still the same.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to develop those critical thinking skills.
Right.
Media literacy. We need to be able to evaluate information carefully,
Yeah.
question our sources, look for those signs of manipulation.
It's almost like we need to be like information detectives,
Yes.
carefully examining the evidence, sorting out fact from fiction.
That's a great way to put it. And remember, even those little pieces of misinformation, the ones that seem harmless, they can build up, gradually erode our trust in institutions, making it harder and harder to tell what's true.
It's like a slow drip of poison.
Yes.
It weakens us, makes us
Yeah.
vulnerable.
It does, and that's why we need to be so vigilant.
Right.
Proactively look for good information from trustworthy sources and have those conversations with people we know.
Yeah. This has been a really insightful deep dive. I feel like I have a much better understanding now
I'm glad to hear that.
of how disinformation works,
Yes.
the history behind it, and also the power we have to fight back.
You do have power. Remember, knowledge is power. The more you understand about disinformation, the better you can resist it and protect yourself and the people you care about.
Exactly. To our listener, we've covered a lot today. From defining disinformation
Right.
to figuring out how it works psychologically, uncovering the sneaky tactics they use to spread it, and most importantly, what you can do to fight back.
Don't forget those techniques we talked about, like inoculation, boosting those reliable sources, and having those one-on-one conversations.
Absolutely. And don't forget, you can find more information on the Union of Concerned Scientists website. You sent us some fantastic articles from them, so it's a great resource.
Definitely. Now that you have this deeper understanding of disinformation, what are you going to do to protect yourself and those you care about? Think about the sources you trust, the conversations you have, and what you share. Every choice we make either amplifies the truth or spreads lies.
That's a powerful thought to end on. We all have a role to play in this fight for truth. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay...